All right, we're going to go ahead and kick off. We've got a lot to cover today. So, as folks are joining us as we set the agenda, we'll let them roll in. But we are diving into AI in August today. I know it's the very tail end of August, but AI has been a big focus for us here at Revenue Pulse for a couple years now, and we're excited to dive in to some actual real use cases and ways to start bringing AI into your organization or your organization into AI. Sort of both, I think, really apply. So today we're going to be covering AI in Marketo and looking at, nope, not yet, how to implement low risk sort of introductory pieces with a higher impact within your system and potentially within the organization. So with that, if you'll jump us forward, Lucas. So we are recording today, and that will be shared post the event, obviously with whatever email you have shared with us. So we are recording in live at the moment, and then the recording will be available afterward. Heavily encourage engagement here. We want all your questions. So feel free to throw whatever you have in Q&A. If there's a particular question or slide that the question is relevant to and you want to include that, happy to have that context as well. And then we will get through as many of those as we can during Q&A at the end. So without further ado, our agenda for today, we'll do quick introductions for our speakers. Excited to have them on the phone with us today. We'll talk through AI fundamentals. Some of this may be something you're already familiar with, and so a bit of a remedial, and some of it may be net new or you're learning it for the first time. So we want to make sure that we're covering everything from the basics to beyond as a baseline for what we're going to be looking at today. We'll be talking about how to integrate ChatGPT with Marketo, since that is going to be a prerequisite for just about every use case that we have here. And then we'll dive into our use cases. And then we have a little bit of a bonus for you because we always like to do a little extra here at RP. So introductions. I am Andy Caron. I'm the president of Revenue Pulse, and I have taken a cue from Tyron here on the no surfing. I'm born and raised in California, but I am not a surfer. I now live in the Midwest, so surfing is not as much of a menu item out here. But I am a 4-time Marketo champ and a certified Marketo architect. And my non-work life, the stuff that I really brings the extra to my life, momming, books. I am an avid reader. Talk to me about it after if you're looking for some good sci-fi or fantasy recommendations. Love them. Gardening, and obviously staying out of any water where I might encounter a nope that will hurt me. So with that, I will pass it to Lucas to introduce himself, and then Tyron, and then we'll dive into the content. Lucas, do you want to?
Sorry, I wasn't being able to unmute. Hello, everyone. I'm Lucas. As you can see, I'm a little clumsy sometimes, so I'm sorry. I'm the director of AI and automation in Revenue Pulse. I'm from São Paulo, Brazil. I'm speaking to you guys from here, and I like to call myself a stereotypical Brazilian because I love samba. I love football, more watching than playing. I'm not very good at any sports, to be honest. If you were following Revenue Pulse in LinkedIn, you saw that we launched a few AI songs, and my favorite one, of course, was Samba da Automação or Automation Samba. So if you haven't heard it yet, go there and listen. I'm also a proud vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for almost 10 years now, and I love it, and I love to cook my own food every day. So if you have any new recipe that you think I should try, please send me. When it comes to my career, I graduated in uni in applied and computational mathematics, so I think that gave me a head start in liking the technical problems, loving the integrations, the APIs, and all of that. And when I started working in marketing operations, I actually made my first API request before I sent my first email, which is a little hard to believe, but that was my my career in the beginning. And well, AI really draws me because it has a lot of those technical challenges that in the end can make our life easier and can make our clients' experience easier too. And I'm also a Marketo certified architect and the Brazilian mug leader. And with that, Tyron.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, my name is Tyron Pretorius, and while my job title is not as cool as Director of AI and Automation, I have worked a lot with ChatGPT in particular and Marketo in the past year and how to integrate them together. And I write about a lot of the stuff I'm doing on my blog, The Workflow Pro, where I also have a lot of YouTube videos and a YouTube channel. I was born in South Africa, but I was raised in Ireland, so that's why you hear the Irish accent. And then I moved to the US 7 years ago now. I studied in Notre Dame, so I was in Indiana for a year, then Chicago for 2 years, and now I currently live in San Diego, and I don't see myself leaving. I love life over here. I love to play volleyball, spike ball. I do yoga on a hill overlooking the ocean, and I love Cali burritos. But the one thing I haven't gotten into is surfing. I tried for a period of about 5 weeks last summer, sometimes going twice a day. Made some progress, caught some green waves, but then I started to regress, got frustrated, got stung by a stingray. And then I was like, okay, I'm sticking to land based activities. And my plate is full enough as it is with volleyball and spike ball. So that's some fun facts about me, and looking forward to talking you through how we're integrating AI with Marketo.
Awesome. We've got a lot to cover. We're going to go pretty quickly, though. If you're finding you need us to slow down a little on something or double click, please let us know. But there's a lot of content here, and we want to make sure we have time to cover it and have some time at the end for QA. So with that, we'll take it away on AI fundamentals.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. And on the AI fundamentals, we were going to tackle three different topics, starting on the difference between general model versus fine-tuned models and why they are useful and why you need to know this difference. Right now, there are so many models out there, and we are seeing things come out every single day that sometimes we don't know why is this useful, why it isn't, what we can do with a specific model. So I think this gives a good guideline that you can follow to understand what you can do with each specific kind of model. You can think of general and fine-tuned models as students in a class. The general model is a good student that always gets at least a B in every subject. And if that student really wants, it can focus in only one subject and master it, becomes a genius of this subject and forget about all the rest. The fine-tuned model, you can think of it as someone that was a good student in the past, but now is a savant. It's a genius in mathematics, but gets always a C minus in geography. Like they simply can't know where Ireland is in a map, for example. So, and it can't change its focus to any other subject. It's really specialized in doing that specific thing. In this case, mathematics, not geography. So that's the main difference. The general models are models that were trained in different topics, and the fine-tuned ones were the ones that were delimited by some instructions after this training. So it's very good on specific things, not on general things. A few general models are ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and a few of the fine-tuned ones are, for example, Jasper, that is very good on creating content, but not on the other things. Like you cannot ask it, for example, to generate code like you can ask other models. You can build custom GPTs that are fine-tuned GPTs that are very good on specific task. And Tyron also presents today the persona use case, and that persona use case uses a fine-tuned model, a fine-tuned ChatGPT, and it's also very good on classifying personas, but it's not very good in anything else in particular. It's very set up to do this one thing. So these are the main models, and this is important because every use case will require a different type of model. So it's good for us to know which are the differences here. Then I know that every time we start talking about AI, you are in the back of your head with the question, is this compliant? Can I do it in my company? What are the guidelines to this? Uh, and before we talk more about compliance, I like always to disclose that I'm not a lawyer, and before doing anything, you should talk with the compliance department in your company. But these are some guidelines and some things that I learned researching through to develop use cases, to work with clients. So the first thing is that ChatGPT is not confidential. So it will, yes, it will retain your data for at least 30 days for operational and security purposes. But yeah, it can be safe to use if you use it appropriately and knowledgeably. So there are some roles when it comes to data retention with OpenAI. So if you're sending your data via the browser, it may be used for model improvements in the future. So they might retain your data for more than 30 days to train the ChatGPT 5, 6, 7, 8, and whatsoever. But you can deactivate this feature. If you're using the API, then it won't retain your data for model improvement. It will still retain it for 30 days for security purposes. But my recommendation is always to ensure that you are compliant with local data regulations. So be sure to talk with the lawyers in your company to be sure that you can do what you're doing, and always anonymize data. So never send, for example, the specific email address for a client to analyze data inside ChatGPT or any other tool. Try to use anonymization, and a good anonymization strategy is to use the lead ID from Marketo, because an ID that holds no meaning outside of your own Marketo instance. So it's a random string of numbers that only holds meaning when you are inside Marketo. Outside of it, it's basically nothing. It's not a good identification. So these are some guidelines on compliance. Again, always ensure that you are compliant and always talk with your team before implementing a use case. But I also would say that during this webinar, you can pretty much chill about the compliance worries, because all the use cases that we are going to present here don't use any personal identifiable information. Some of them don't even use the lead ID. So as a an ID, lead identification. So you can be sure that all these use cases are safe to use. And finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about pricing, because there are use cases that require that you communicate with OpenAI using the prompt, using the browser. And to do that, of course, everyone knows that you have the $20 that you pay every month for a subscription that allows you to have access to newer models, allows you to have custom GPTs and all of that. But the pricing structure is not the same when you are talking to it via the API, and some of the use cases will require the API here. To understand the pricing structure via the API, you have to understand what are tokens in the AI world. And tokens are basically the fundamental unit of text for an artificial intelligence model or an LLM model. And you can say that it usually contains around 4 characters, especially if you're not in English. In English, it's usually one word. So you can see here on the right an example of OpenAI's tokenizer. So here's an example of how a sentence is split in tokens. So here in the first line, it's in English itself, of course, but the fourth line is the same sentence in Portuguese. So you can see that some words are actually 2 tokens in Portuguese, and it's usually around 4 letters. And the pricing, why is that important? Because pricing is based on tokens. So you can visit OpenAI pricing page and get a better understanding on how much it costs. It's usually pretty cheap, to be honest, compared to knowledge work in general. So for example, the GPT-4o, you pay $5 to send 1 million tokens, so roughly 1 million words if you're speaking English, and you pay $15 to receive an output of 1 million words. But they now are releasing, and this is not ChatGPT only, many different companies are releasing mini models that are highly accurate, not 100% there, but I would say 90 to 95% the capabilities of the Frontiers model as GPT-4o. And they are much cheaper because they are much smaller. So if your use case do not require highly intelligence, you can use the GPT-4o mini. That's around 1/30th of the price, even less actually. So for example, to send 1 million words is 15 cents of a dollar instead of $5. So that's also a big big advantage and a big leverage that you can use when implementing our use cases. And with that, I'll pass it to Tyron to explain how you can integrate AI with Marketo.
Hey everyone, there are three main ways you can integrate ChatGPT with Marketo. The first I'll walk you through is using webhooks. So you set up your webhook in the admin section within Marketo, and you make the URL request to the completions endpoint, and you can find this in the ChatGPT API documentation. And then when you format the payload, you choose the model you want. And then within the content, you're able to use lead and company tokens, which contain information about the lead in your Marketo database. So this is how you can give lead information to ChatGPT in your request. So in this example here, we're just asking it to qualify someone as either a good fit or a bad fit based on their company website. And once we send this request, next slide, Lucas.
Sorry.
We can see, no, you're good. I'll prompt you to go to the next slides.
Thanks.
We can see that we had the lead quality field mapped to the output of that webhook. So once the webhook gets sent to ChatGPT, it then puts its answer and its response back in the lead quality field, and it got updated to good fit. And if we dig into the activity log a bit more, we can just see what it looks like within the activity log when we send this event. So at the very bottom, we can see the response that got returned from ChatGPT in the content parameter. We can see it contains good fit, and this is the value that got passed into the quality score field. And next slide. And then just digging into the activity detail again, we can see the reason why the lead quality field was updated was because we sent this webhook to ChatGPT. And one thing to note about using the Marketo webhook option and why it might not be the best is that you have very little capability to manipulate and parse the response that you get from ChatGPT. So in this case, if ChatGPT happened to return a lot of extra stuff you didn't need, if it said, I believe the lead is a good fit because of X, Y, or Z, then that would all go into your lead quality field and it would mess things up on your end. So you have to be very strict in defining your prompt to ChatGPT to say, hey, I only want you to return either good fit or bad fit. So that's one restriction of using webhooks from within Marketo, is the inability to parse the response you get from ChatGPT. But that's where middlemen like Zapier and another platform called Replit, which I'll talk about now, can solve that issue. So here we've just got a simple workflow within Zapier where when a lead gets added to a list, we're going to score them with ChatGPT, and this is the exact same prompt that we had from Marketo. We're just making the request from within Zapier now. But the advantage of using Zapier is that we can use all its third-party integrations and all its tools to customize and parse the response that we get from ChatGPT before we push that back into Marketo. So that's what's being done in step number 3 here, is we're extracting the score value that ChatGPT gave us, as well as the reason for that score, and then we're pushing those into fields within Marketo. And then another platform I use that I really like because I'm comfortable with Python programming is a platform called Replit. And all Replit does is it hosts Python code. So when we send a webhook from Marketo, we have this Python code in Replit listening out for that webhook. It catches the webhook containing all the information from Marketo about the person. It makes a request to ChatGPT, and then we can use any Python code we want to do all sorts of things to the response we get from ChatGPT. And then the final part of it is we can update the lead in Marketo via API with the information we got from ChatGPT. So both of these platforms, Replit and Zapier, give you complete customization over what you're sending to ChatGPT, as well as formatting the response that comes back. And if you want a walkthrough of how to set up webhooks within Marketo to send to ChatGPT, or how to use Zapier, like I showed in that example there, to score someone and then parse a response and send it back into Marketo, you can check out this blog post here. And then the third and final way to get insights about your Marketo data is using list imports. And we'll use the first example of, let's say you've got your contact sales form and you want to ask ChatGPT to find trends and patterns about all the people who filled out your contact sales form. So you'd create a list view of all these people and you bring in all the fields. So in this example here, we're bringing in the additional information field, which contains the sales inquiry. And then we're going to export this list of all the contact sales form information. And then later on, we'll bring that into ChatGPT and just ask it questions about it to extract insights. So that was the first way, is using the list view. And that's useful for extracting information about the people in your database, what field values they have. However, if you want to extract activity information from all the leads in your database, that's when you need to use the bulk export API. So if it's lead information, you use a list. If it's activity information, you need to use the bulk API. And that's where you'd make a request like this using this API endpoint to extract all the lead activity. So it could be email activity, web page visits, etc. And then once you have all this data, you'd upload it to ChatGPT as a CSV file. You'd give it some context to say, hey, these are all the email send and open times for our leads within the past 90 days. We want you to find the best time of day to email these people to maximize the chances that they will open future emails. And then you say, please return the optimum send time in Central District time, which is your Marketo time zone instance. That's my time zone instance. That's my instance's time zone is CDT, so that's why I put that in there. And make sure to give it as a digit from 1 to 24. We'll be diving into this example more later on. So this is just a high level for now. But then the last part of that is, once we have that best send time for each lead in our database, we can just simply do a list import to bring that best send time into Marketo. And you'll notice that Lucas and I will talk about the Marketo API quite often in this presentation. And there's a reason for it. It can unlock so much when it comes to automating workflows and extracting data from Marketo. So if you're not sure what an API is, there's a very good intro course that will introduce you to the concept of APIs in general. And then if you want to learn more specifically about the Marketo API, then there's a follow-up course on the Marketo API specifically that walks you through how to interact with Marketo assets via API, how to extract activity information using the bulk export API, how to merge leads, how to clone and create programs, all that good sort of stuff. And lots of people at Revenue Pulse have actually taken this Marketo API course, so they're all experts in it now. So it's very well vetted by the Revenue Pulse team.
Yeah, it's indeed a great course. And also, don't be frightened anytime we talk about API, because other than also the course that is very good that you can take and you can learn from it, every use case has also a related blog post that we are going to share with you guys. And in those blog posts, there's all the code needed to implement it. So basically, don't have to write it. It's all written for you. And there is also a special resource in the end that will help you implement these use cases too. So the first use case, now that we level set in the AI fundamentals and how to integrate AI with Marketo, is the first use case is the sentiment analysis one, or you can call it content analysis. And also, and what this solves is it helps you create a better content strategy for your communications. So many times when marketers are deciding what communication to send, which campaign to do, they get lost in the data and don't know exactly which resonates better with the audience. This use case is aimed to help you solve this problem. And we call it low risk, high gain use case because it uses no lead information at all. We only use aggregate engagement data from the emails. And there is no interaction between your leads and AI. So it's not like they are talking with a chatbot and the chatbot might hallucinate or deliver bad information. No, this is just for an internal process. So it's a very low risk. I would say risk zero. And it's a high gain because it will really help you understand which topics are leading to a better engagement. It's leading to a better click rate, open rate, and in the end, MQLs and revenue, and to help you improve your content strategy. And to do it, you have to follow the steps. You have to get your email report from the email performance report from Marketo, get the email IDs from that email performance report. With the email IDs, you use the API to get subject and content for each email and send it to the AI analyzer to understand what is the best subject and content type to get the better engagement from your database. So I think most people here probably already have created email performance reports in Marketo. They are the easiest and most straightforward ones. You just go to marketing activities or the analytics area and click on new report and create your email performance report. After you created it, you select the emails that you want to consider on the marketing activity emails area or archived emails area in Design Studios too. And this part is a little critical because you cannot compare orange to apples, right? Like you cannot compare emails that were sent to bottom of funnel to emails that were sent to top of funnel. The ideal thing here is that you select emails that were sent to the same audience or to very similar audiences, so it makes sense when we are comparing. And you can do this analysis many and many times. You can do it one time for top of funnel people in a specific region, and then you can do it for bottom of funnel people in another specific region, and you can understand how each segment of your audience engage better. But I think the most important thing here is select an audience, select a few emails instead of doing everything. After you export the report, it will look like this in an Excel file. You have the number of sends delivered, the open rate, the click rate, all of that. It will also have the program and email name. But what we won't have is the subject and the text. So you can do that manually. You can go into every email, get the information, the text information, and add here. But what you can also do is use the API, and the code is not here, but it will be available for you guys in the blog post, so you can go there and learn it. So in the report, you have the email name with program name dot email asset name. You have to split into two columns with the program name and asset name. With that, you do an API request that gets the email ID. And with the email ID, you can do new API requests to get the email subject and content. And the main thing is that in the end, you have a report with all the engagement metrics and also the subject and text. And that is very, very useful to send now to AI and analyze it to have uh, the information and the insights of which topics are resonating better with your audience. So in the end, you send that to ChatGPT with the following prompt that you're a marketing data analyst at a company. You explain your company, you explain what you do, and explain what is that audience that you are sending and that email report. And you ask that your job is to analyze the data. And you ask for sentiment analysis, which type of subject lines result in a higher open rate and content result in a higher click rate. You also ask about specific words and specific topics, and it will respond to you with a great summary of topics, of words, and of sentiment that you have to add in your email's content and subject line to engage better with your audience there. And if you want to learn more about this, if you want to dive into the code and implement in your company, you can scan this QR code here and to lead you to the blog post where you can learn more.
All right, thank you, Lucas. So on to our next exciting use case, which I gave a prelude to earlier on, which is finding the best send time for everyone in your database. So again, this is a very low risk, high reward activity to do. And there's no PII involved. You're just sending the lead ID along with all the email activity for that lead ID to ChatGPT. So there's no way for it to tie all that back to any individual. So again, low risk, high reward, which is what we like. And so the overview of this is we're going to extract everyone's email activity from our database, which will contain the times they were delivered an email and the times they opened an email. We're going to send a prompt to ChatGPT to then analyze all these send and delivery times to each lead, and then for each lead, find the best send time. We're going to import that information into Marketo, and then we're going to use that best send time in our smart campaigns to hopefully drive higher engagement with our emails and get more opens and get more clicks, because we're emailing people at the time that suits them best and not just emailing everyone in our database at 10 a.m. Central Time. So the first part of this involves extracting the engagement data for all your email activity. And this is done using the bulk export API, like I mentioned earlier on. And you do this with a Python script, which makes the request to extract all this information from Marketo, and it saves it as a CSV file. And it's this CSV file that we then bring into ChatGPT, and we ask it the question, oh, well, first, this is the output file we get from the Python script, where we can see the lead ID along with all the emails they've received, the times they received those emails, and the times they opened them. And this is then what we feed into ChatGPT. And we say, hey, ChatGPT, this is all the email activity for all the leads in our database. Please find a best send time for all of these people. And one thing to be wary of is when you're using the bulk export API, all those times you saw in that previous slide are in UTC time. So you need to make it aware of that and say, hey, these are all in UTC time, but I want you to find the best send time for each person and give it to me in the time zone of your Marketo instance, which in this case is Central District time, and give me that best send time as a digit from 1 to 24. And then the output you get from ChatGPT is you'll get a lead ID, which you will need to map to email addresses before you import into Marketo, because when you do a list import with Marketo, you can't use lead ID. You need to do email address. And then all those email addresses will get associated with the best send time. And you can bring that into Marketo using a simple list import. And then we've got a not so fun job of setting up our smart campaign to send at this best send time. But don't worry, once you set it up in the flow of a smart campaign once, you can just clone it then for the next time. So the way it works is in your very first step, you say, if the person's best send time, let me start even earlier. When you're scheduling this to run, you schedule it to run at midnight. So in this case, it's running at 12 a.m. Central District time. And then when you go into the flow of your smart campaign, when this runs at midnight, the very first step will check to see, hey, if the person's best send time is midnight or 0 in this case, then let's send them the newsletter. Else, let's wait 45 minutes. And then the next step is if the person's best send time is 1 a.m., let's send them the newsletter. Else, we're going to wait another 45 minutes or an hour, basically. And then let's send all the people whose best send time is 2 a.m. the newsletter, and so on. You have to do this 23 times, 24 times in the flow. But as I said, once you have it created once, you can just clone it to send your next newsletter. And then hopefully you should see a lot more opens and clicks with your next newsletter now that we're sending to each person at their individual best send time. And then if you want to take a look at the Python code that's used to make the bulk extract API requests and get those CSV output files that you can simply upload to ChatGPT, then you can check out these two blog posts. And the Python code in these blog posts is designed to be plug and play. You'll just need to enter your own API credentials, and then you should simply be able to press the run button on any platform that can run Python code, and then you'll get the nice output file that you can start using right away. And straight on to the next one. The next one is about persona classification. So again, this is low risk. We're not sending information about any of the leads to ChatGPT, only the job title, only the job title, industry, and anything else we're interested in using to classify them into a different persona. And then, as we know, as marketers, classifying people into different personas can help us send better emails because we're tailoring the content to these personas. but it can also help with lead scoring models where we might want to make it much easier for C-suite executives at startups to become marketing qualified rather than student interns at a large multinational corporation who we probably just want to disqualify right away. So again, low risk, high reward. The first part of it, and just to give you an overview, is we need to create a training data set so we can tell ChatGPT for all these historical leads, this is how we want them to be classified into different personas. We need to get it into a nice format that ChatGPT can read and recognize. And then ChatGPT will build a model based off this training data set. And then in future requests that we make to classify future leads into personas, we'll reference this fine-tuned model, and then ChatGPT will give us that person's persona based on the fine-tuned model. So the first thing to do is we're going to have all our job titles mapped to the different personas that we want. And this is like the human readable format that we can all understand. This is the very first part of it, is organizing it in this format. And then the next part of it is the not so fun part of it, where we have to take this nice that ChatGPT can recognize when it's creating the training data set for the fine-tuned model. And we have a blog post that will show you how to put the mapping of your job titles to personas in this nice format. And you can reference that here with the QR code. And then this is the output that you will then upload to ChatGPT to create that fine-tuned model. And that blog post will walk you through how to do that. So you split the data between a training and a testing data set. So if you have 1,000 leads that you have mapped job titles for to personas, let's say you put 70% of them in the training data set, and then you keep the remaining 30% of them, or 300 people, to test that training data set afterwards. So you pick your base model. In this case, it could be ChatGPT 4 or 3.5. And then you use the API to send this data to OpenAI so that it can create the fine-tuning model. And once it's created, you'll get an email when it's finished. And it'll give you a model ID that you can then reference in subsequent API requests. So in this case, we're going to use the webhook structure that I showed you before, where we're going to include the model ID number within the request we're making to ChatGPT. So it'll reference that fine-tuned model. And then another cool trick is you can set the maximum number of tokens to 1. So as Lucas mentioned at the start of this presentation, a token is around 4 characters. And in this case, since we know ChatGPT should only return a value of like P1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, it should only return 2 characters. So that's one way you can constrain ChatGPT to give you the response you're looking for, is by restricting the maximum number of tokens it can return. And then we have our prompt. We ask ChatGPT, hey, this is the person's job title. Please map this to the persona. And we can see highlighted in the response at the very bottom of this image that it mapped this person to the P3 persona. And we can see that it was a data analyst. Where this is really powerful, where sometimes in Marketo, people will use contains matching within smart campaign flows to match people to different job titles. But what if you're a multinational company and you have form fills in different languages? This is where ChatGPT is really powerful, because it'll be able to tell whether someone enters data analyst in French, Spanish, Colombian, no, Colombian is not a language, French, Spanish, Korean, Chinese, whatever it is. It'll be able to map
You've just offended the whole continent there.
Hopefully there's no Colombians on the call. My geography isn't the best. I'm more like a savant, as Lucas mentioned. So that's where it's so powerful, is it'll be able to handle different languages and still map them to the correct personas. And it can also do fuzzy matching. So in the case that someone misspells like chief technology officer, it'll be able to catch any misspells and still map those to the correct persona. So the fuzzy matching logic and the ability to handle different languages is what makes this persona matching so powerful with ChatGPT. And again, if you need help putting the mapping you have into that format that ChatGPT can understand for the fine-tuned model, then you can check out this blog post that will walk you through how to do all of that.
All right, now we go into our bonus use case that we mentioned that we would have in the beginning of this webinar, and we call it sales acceleration. And this aims to reduce friction between marketing and sales, because I know that's very uncommon that marketing and sales have friction. Like usually marketing is super grateful for the way that sales treat their leads, and sales is always very happy with the MQLs they received, and they pretty much understand why someone MQL'd. So that's not really a big problem in marketing operations, but we decided to create a use case for that. Either way, uh, I'm obviously joking, but what why is this valuable? What this use case actually does is that it explains in natural language, in human terms, in plain English, why a lead MQL'd for its main interests and how they should approach this person. Just the lead ID, and it's a high gain because you can accelerate the sales process by having a clear and direct explanation of why this lead MQL'd, and the salesperson will engage with them much easier and much faster, leading to a better conversion rate too in the end. So to do that, we will actually use a middleman workflow in an iPaaS platform. As Tyron explained in the beginning, this is one of the ways that we can integrate Marketo with ChatGPT. In my case, I use Zapier, but you can use any iPaaS that you want, like Replit. You can use Marketo, Power Automate, whatever your company uses. You have to get the engagement data prompt, that create a prompt to ChatGPT, and then finally return that response from ChatGPT to a field in Marketo that will be synced to the CRM. So the first thing that you have to do is create this workflow here, and the first step, it will have to be a workflow that is triggered by an HTTP request that will be connected with Marketo via webhook. Then you get the access token and the paging token. The access token is the token that you need in order to communicate with the API, and the paging token is important for the activities endpoint, because it's what tells the API basically when you want to start querying activities from. So you can say, oh, return me all the activities since last month, for example. After you have these two tokens, you actually get the activities sent to ChatGPT. Again, only identifiable here via the lead ID, and then you post to a Marketo field. So for example, here is how you create a trigger in Zapier using an HTTP request. And I delimited here that the only thing that I wanted to pick off from that webhook request is the ID. And in Marketo, I'll set up the webhook to send only the lead ID with the API call, with the webhook call. After Zapier receives that API call, you'll have to run two other API calls to Marketo. Basically, you have to get the access token in this first endpoint, and I highlighted in yellow where you should replace by your Munchkin code, by your instance ID, basically, and you can get that in the instance URL. And then you have to get the paging token that, as I said, will define the time frame you want to query the lead activities. The weird thing about this paging token is that you cannot set a specific time frame, like from January until February last year. You can only say, I want everything from January until now, or from February until now. So the end date is always now, and you can only set the start date. And here's the endpoint that you have to use. Again, the only difference here is that you have to change this to your instance Munchkin. After you have this two, you have to extract the activities. In this use case in specific, I use the following activity type IDs, because you cannot say to the API, oh, extract these specific activities. You have to give it some activity type IDs. That's how they understand it. So activity 1, that's visit web page, 2, fill out form, 3, click the link, 10, open email, 11, click email, and 104, program status updates. So you get all the activities from that specific lead on any of those actions. So any engagement, highly valuable action you will receive. And this endpoint can only return 300 activities per call. If you're doing it in a small time frame, like a month, maybe you don't need a loop. But if you want to explain to your salesperson what this specific lead did in the last 6 months from MQL, then you definitely need to loop into this endpoint to get all the information that you need. So this is an example of how the activities look in the end. So you have here your lead IDs. So if we have just one, it will be only one lead ID, the activity date, the activity ID, the attribute ID, and the program name, all of that. You can see that the only identification here is the lead ID. We never use email address in that case. The API doesn't even respond with email address, to be honest, when you are extracting the activities. If you want the email address, you have to do an extra API call. This is the only identification that you have. And then you send this to ChatGPT via the Zapier workflow or the iPads workflow that you prefer. In my case was Zapier, asking it to analyze the data of a lead.mql, then explain to a salesperson. In the end, it's important to give this reminder that this will only be read by a salesperson. So don't use too many technical terms and technical explanations of it gained 10 scoring points because it visited this specific web page. No, just keep like a best summary, very limited and limited to 100 words. This is a way that you can be sure it's also not going to be giving a huge response, because if you're giving a huge response to the salesperson to read, then you're not making his life or her life easier. You are just changing the problem to read a big field in Salesforce or Dynamics or which CRM you're using. And then after you get the Marketo response, the ChatGPT response, you have to add that to a field in Marketo using the leads endpoint. And so for example, this was one response. The lead was marked MQL, the engagement in these activities, particular show interest in these products, uh, complete activities related to these classes, and field forms indicating strong interest, approach the client by discussing the functionalities of this and that. Well, it basically explains everything that this lead did and its main interests based on their activity. So it's easier for the salesperson to start a conversation there. And if you want to, again, learn more about this and get all the codes, I talked about a lot about endpoints in this specific use case because it uses a lot of API, but all the code is already written in this blog post and supposed to be also plug and play for you to help you there. And yeah, thank you so much for your attention throughout this 4 different use cases and how valuable they can be for your business.
Yes, thank you to you both for bringing these for the audience today. There are some questions in Q&A, so we'll run through those. And if you have more questions, I know I saw at least one hand go up. Feel free to throw other things in there. We got about 10 minutes to cover stuff, so if you want to connect with any of us with additional questions, post this. Feel free to do so. There are our codes for easy access, and then we'll leave these up while we do Q&A because that way people don't have to go hunting for them later. So
May I just add one thing before
yes.
Q&A, Andy? Sure. Yeah, please connect with us. But if you are too shy to talk to us also in LinkedIn, although you can see we are very cool people, we created a small present here for you that is our own GPT. So for those who were in Tyron night session in Summit 2, we gave this GPT to that it was trained in our session in all the use cases. This is actually the same one, but we trained it more in the new use cases that we added in the new blog posts that we created. So this is basically our collective brain here. But yeah, if you want some human interaction, we are here too.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's jump
And
back to
let's
the
keep them
two
all.
or the three codes. Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So let's dig in. So there was a question kind of when we were earlier on with connecting Marketo and GPT, for example, wanting to know a bit more detail about how they can limit lead data to just the Marketo ID when you're interacting with GPT. So in other words, how do you gate or stop or prevent the API from just grabbing everything or more than what you wanted?
All right, you can answer that, Tyron, if you prefer.
Yeah. So when you're doing the list export method, like I said, you control what you're exporting in Marketo with the list view you're using. So you can just make sure you have the lead ID in there, and then you can make sure to remove things like the person's email address or their home address. When you're using the API, you can specifically configure it to return fields you're interested in. And for examples like the bulk extract API, it always identifies with the lead ID and then returns all the activity information associated with the lead ID. It'll never pull in PII on its own. But then if you're making requests about the lead database and you're trying to extract information about leads, you can specify what fields you want the API to extract. So whether you wanted to pull in job title only and industry and leave out everything else, you can configure it when you're making the API request. And even then, when you extract using the Marketo API with your Python script and you look at the downloaded CSV file afterwards, and you see, oh no, the person's email address in there or their home address is in there, you can always bring the CSV into Google Sheets, delete those two columns, save the CSV again, and then bring that into ChatGPT. So you can always control you can always control the CSV before you put it into ChatGPT to avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Also,
if you're
when
using
you're writing a webhook, you control what it uses or sees in order to then take as well, right?
yeah, exactly. Like the API, Marketo API response won't add more than what you need. Actually, there was one project much past in my life that I needed to get the activity and the email address together, and it was painful because it doesn't return the email address even if you ask for it. So you have to basically do another API call to get the email address if you really need it. The activity API will never return it by itself. There is only one catch, and one catch that I think it's very important for you all to know if you're using the activity. One, if you add the activity fill out form, you have to remove one specific field it returns because it returns what the person filled in the form, like every field. So
Yeah, you
that might
can't
have
overwrite that. Yeah.
uh, yeah, you have to remove that before sending it to ChatGPT. That's very, very important. But other than that, no other activity type of the ones that we are mentioning here about engagement are going to do that. So for example, if you query change data value as an activity type, it will and you change the email address of a person, it will appear in the response because it will appear like the old value and new value, just like when you click on an activity in Marketo activity log. So you have to be mindful of the activities that you are extracting. And if they contain PII, you have to remove it before sending to ChatGPT. But open email never has it, clicks email never has it, visit web page never has it, program status change never has it either. The only engagement one that has, and you have to be mindful, is fill out form.
We've got another question around one of the specific use cases, and this is on the ideal send time.
Yeah.
So they were looking for some clarification. It says you send the lead information to GPT anonymized, but because we need an email address to re-upload to Marketo, since you cannot match against the ID, doesn't that defeat the purpose of anonymizing it in the first place? So in other words, if you're exporting the list with the ID and then trying to re-import it, how do you manage that with keeping the email anonymized? I know I would probably just do a down and dirty, like strip the data before it goes in and then pull it back in and do a merge data with the ID as the primary. And then I have the email address to upload back in. But what do the wizards say?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So ChatGPT never sees the email address. So the bulk extract API gives it with the lead ID, all the activity info. That's what gets uploaded to ChatGPT. It gives you back the lead ID with all the best send times. And then the onus is on you to do the mapping from lead ID to email address once you have the output CSV from ChatGPT. So probably the best way to do this is you could export a simple list view with all the lead IDs and all the email addresses from your Marketo instance, but that might be huge. And then once you have that, you just do like a VLOOKUP function in Google Sheets to look up the email address for each lead ID. And then you'll be able to get the email address along with the best send time and then re-upload that into Marketo. So to summarize, ChatGPT only ever sees the lead ID and activity data. You get an output data set which contains ID and best send time, and then you have to do the mapping with ID to email address and bring that back into Marketo. But you do that on your own personal machine using Excel or Google Sheets, and maybe you can delete the Google Sheet afterwards if you're that concerned about it, and then you bring it back into Marketo.
And if you want to be extra safe and you don't want to even have email addresses in your computer, you can also do that via API only using the lead ID. So in the sales acceleration use case, we talked about returning the data using this endpoint here. And this endpoint here can update any field using only the lead ID and the new value of the field. So you can use also this endpoint here to update the best send time of all the leads that you got from ChatGPT if you don't want to have the email addresses in your computer. Even I would say it's easier to do this match manually in your computer and then just re-upload it as a list. But I know that there are company policies that sometimes you can't export the list with email addresses even. So in that case, you can use the same endpoint to do that.
So essentially what we're saying is different rules for list upload, download versus API and the ID.
Yeah. Yeah. Though you can use email address as an ID in the API too, it's set as default as lead ID, so no need to change that.
Agreed. Awesome. Well, we are just coming up on time. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. We will share out recording post this. And we appreciate everyone who joined us today and those who stayed through to the end. Great to have you. And excited to see some of the use cases you come up with. Please share them back with us. We love seeing what new folks are doing. So, all right. Thanks all. Have a great day.